Hello and welcome to Business of Cannabis podcast. My name is Stephen Murphy, CEO of Publish Partners, and joining me today is Aris Azadian, co-founder and CEO of Avicanna, probably one of the leading global biotech cannabinoid companies based in Toronto, in Canada, but with operations around the world. Aris, very welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, Steve.
Great. Look, Aris, like we've had the pleasure of knowing each other for a number of years, but you've always been, despite being a public company and having to release a certain amount of information, you've always been kind of one step ahead in terms of uncovering the latest development or latest requirements in terms of patient care and patient access when it comes to cannabis-based medicine. And there is the most recent announcement from Avicanna relating to the partnership or development with Shoppers Drug Mart is something that has obviously huge significance in Canada and for patients in Canada, but I think for patients around the world in terms of the evolution of the medical cannabis market. So perhaps you can kind of give me a little bit of background in terms of the how you got in with Shoppers Drug Mart, and I suppose the rationale for kind of positioning this within your business and group.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks, Stephen. So I think first of all, I think it's important for everyone to understand Shoppers is the largest pharmacy chain in Canada. They're the CVS or the Walgreens in the United States, as a reference, and they were the first, I would say, major federal national level pharmacy chain that developed, established, and then actually delivered a medical cannabis care platform, which means full medical cannabis offerings to patients, full patient support programs, so like pharmacist-led, call centers and advice support, but also they were in many ways pioneers in terms of reimbursement. We're talking private and public reimbursement, which is obviously an adjudication process. And the summary is we're going to be transitioning and taking over this very successful medical platform, this very successful medical business, which is tens of thousands of patients across the country in Canada, and I believe is the gold standard for complete medical cannabis care. In terms of how we got started in this journey, Stephen, you and I think have known each other for 7 years now. Originally, we were biotech, just drug pipeline, and taking sort of let's say the Canadian version of a GW Pharma story. However, when access to capital got limited, we actually started transitioning into medical cannabis, meaning we took our pharmaceutical drugs, we took those pharmaceutical preparations that were substantially more advanced than what's still in the market, products that had preclinical data, stability data, products that had enhanced absorption, bioavailability, etc., and we actually started commercializing them under medical cannabis. But the first medical cannabis product I ever sold, or Avicanna ever sold, was with Shoppers. So we actually were exclusive, and for us, coming from a more of a strict medical pharma background, we wanted this to be through Shoppers Drug Mart. So we built an incredible relationship with them, started with 2 SKUs exclusively, actually, and then today we have 23, and we started getting into much more advanced discussions and collaborations, specifically in the clinical side. So we started in clinical collaborations. One of the collaborations I'm very excited to continue to do is Sunnybrook Cancer Center, which is a research center / hospital where we are actually dispensing medical cannabis in the hospital to oncology patients. So that was done in collaboration with Shoppers. So we really built that relationship. I think we demonstrated our ethos, we demonstrated our focus on patient care, and I think when time came for them to transition that business, we were identified as the right partner because of that very direct, untainted focus on medical.
Can patient access and patient access programs have especially in early stage, cannabis, medical cannabis itself has generally been kind of populated by new companies. Companies with first time, or certainly first time a management team has been put together, who are going through the ropes of building processes, building the supply chain, building patient care. what was it that I suppose Shoppers Drug Mart were able to bring to medical cannabis, or certainly medical cannabis care for patients, in terms of having a more established background and a history and a legacy of doing that for patients, not just for cannabis, compared to what you've seen out there in terms of new solutions being provided?
That's a good question. I think first of all, they are the biggest pharmacy brand in Canada, so that allowed to offset one of the major issues that we face in terms of commercialization and scale of medical cannabis, which is stigma. So naturally, if you have the option of assessing the option for medical cannabis, or you're a physician and you want to prescribe medical cannabis to a patient, and you can refer them to a cannabis licensed producer or to Shoppers Drug Mart, you're likely going to look at Shoppers Drug Mart as, let's say, the less stigmatized or less risky pathway. So I think that was quite important. And within that context, they were able to also leverage off of their existing infrastructure in many ways. They obviously have a large team dedicated to patient care. They were able to utilize their existing, let's say, IT infrastructure, the insurance relationships to actually get these insurance providers on board. So in many ways, Shoppers move this medical cannabis, let's say, project forward in leaps, like massively, because of their reputation, because of their scale. And so while they're a pharmacy company, the medical cannabis by Shoppers division, that team that was led by Ken and Rashid and Tim and that team, they became experts of medical cannabis. So they had the expertise when it came to medical cannabis. Most of them are pharmacists. So it was a very unique positioning in which they had the infrastructure, but then they have the understanding of cannabis, which you never get both, right? And I think they did an incredible job of building the platform. We think it's an honor to be able to have, obviously, worked with them for years, but now be able to take over this business, take over this base that they've built, and hopefully be able to enhance it and grow it. But I think those are key variables, and again, having federal legislation allowed that to take place, where that's not going to happen in CVS or Walgreens anytime soon.
No, and I think, our good friend Larry Lyser, who runs Hello MD, and has been looking for enhancing patient care and bringing together, the healthcare community and patients for some time, kind of recognized the achievements and accomplishments developed by that team at Shoppers Drug Mart, and what they have done. I think what's also very, very interesting is the ability to blend the reimbursement, both public and private healthcare reimbursement, and something, when taking this, is this then a platform or technology that can be localized and internationalized? Is this something that you will be, as you expand and as you broaden the focus of Avicanna, will you be looking to take this level of technology and services with you?
Yeah, again, another great question. So I think I would call it a full package. I don't think it's just technology. I think it's more so know-how, services, standard operating procedures. In terms of technology, the safety data, privacy requirements that cannabis regulations have is relatively primitive compared to those of private and public payers that they require in terms of data breaches, patient safety, patient information breaches, etc. So Shoppers had built those processes, and we are now implementing those processes. So we will have a base that not only will allow us to provide continuation of care for the existing patients, but also to be able to build a platform that we can bring on more private and public payers in Canada initially. Second, it's about growing that patient population. So it's working with the payers to notify them of the opportunities related to medical cannabis, specifically in pharmacoeconomic data. Right, it's essentially showing that, hey, current reimbursement, it might be only for spasticity or for chemotherapy-induced nausea, but have you considered the benefits of medical cannabis for your pain patients and the potential reduction of short-term, long-term disability? Right, things like that I think we're going to be now, hopefully, but I believe we will be collaborating with the larger private and public payers is going to be very, in my opinion, is going to be monumental in the size of the population. But from there on, you take that entire package, and now you've established a gold standard in a G8 country, and you can now work with other countries. So I'll use the example of one day when the US goes federal, it's, in my opinion, it's not going to be a multi-state operator that all of a sudden lands in CVS or Walgreens. It's going to be the company that has perhaps done this already, in another country successfully, has the SOPs, has the programs in place. And I think that can very much be translated and expanded internationally. It does also come with medical education, patient education platforms, and continued medical education courses, things like that you're very familiar with, Stephen. That again, I think you provide as a complete package, right? So the opportunity is absolutely to expand it.
Now, in speaking of internationalization and kind of adding to your stack of services and offerings, on the 2nd and 3rd of May, you will be coming and speaking at Cannabis Europa in the Barbican in London. We're excited to have you, but London, Europe has long had the interest of certainly Canadian cannabis companies. What do you feel is different about 2023 compared to 2018 or 2019 for European cannabis, and why why are you making more of an effort now with internationalization and spotting the opportunity within or certainly adopting the opportunity in Europe?
So let's start with the companies, right? I think, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I remember, attending your conference, and there was thousands of companies, a lot of people that thought they're going to become rich overnight from entering the cannabis sector. And I think that era is over. So now you actually have the companies that have survived, the companies that have built, infrastructure, have real businesses, have been identified, and we're looking to collaborate with those. In many cases, we know them. So I think it's a very different opportunity now. I think it's a little bit more serious. I think the cleanse that was necessary is gone. Regulations have obviously advanced in Europe to a certain extent across cosmetic, medical, and pharma. So I think there's interesting opportunities for us there. We have certainly grown and evolved as an organization. We really, went double down in Canada and ensured that we get this medical cannabis / our pharmaceutical pipeline right. So now we're in a position to, in my opinion, have better offerings. But most importantly, at a very macro level about the European opportunity, I think the opportunity is medical, and I think everyone is looking at the shiny object being recreational, and when will Germany legalize recreational, because everyone's going to become rich again. And I think the opportunity is medical. Medical legislation exists that can be scaled. Shoppers Drug Mart is an example of that, and that needs to be done with professionalism, step by step, and it has to be done with hand-holding for the patients and collaboration with the medical community. And I think that's the real opportunity. And for me, frankly, I would prefer if recreational or adult use slows down, because we saw what happened in Canada. Medical was growing, medical was getting established, medical community was getting interested in getting involved, and they are, with the likes of Avicanna. But then when the dispensaries popped up in every corner, physicians started saying, well, why would I prescribe? Why would I help a patient? They can just walk into a dispensary. And I think that's also wrong from the HCPs, right? From a physician perspective. You don't want a patient with multiple sclerosis to walk into a dispensary and ask a bud tender for advice, So I think having medical and rec at the same time can be harmful to the potential of medical. So having a strictly medical system and infrastructure for at least a few more years so we can grow medical cannabis properly in Europe is going to be, in my opinion, the real opportunity.
And look, the big question and challenge within or the growth of the market is, of course, reimbursement and where reimbursement happens. Now, in Germany, majority public or majority kind of reimbursed publicly or privately. But for a lot of countries legalizing, they're citing either lack of evidence or lack of information regarding failure to reimburse and putting the onus on the patient to pay for it out of pocket. Do you feel much better equipped now with MyMedica and the information you have at hand from Shoppers Drug Mart of lobbying, or certainly talking to regulators and showing them a very clear path forward in terms of best approach for reimbursement? And is that something that that is an area that you feel that you could certainly have a market advantage over?
So I believe, yes, I think we're qualified and we have the experience, but I think the approach, in my opinion, would be first make the products more affordable, because reimbursement is going to take time, right? So if medical cannabis is more affordable because we're sourcing, the API or the biomass from the right, suppliers, and we see a little bit of rationalization of pricing within the market, people will pay out of pocket for products that are helping them if they're affordable, right? And I think we saw that in the UK already, massive price reductions. If we can continue to drive those prices down to what is more affordable for the general population, you are going to have substantially better adoption. You don't need reimbursement only to have adoption. Second, I think in terms of reimbursement, perhaps the opportunities with private payers first. And that's where, again, the pharmacoeconomic data and the collaborations to demonstrate, hey, you can reduce opioid use and you can reduce costs associated to short-term, long-term disability and other treatments through cannabinoids. And yes, then I think we've seen it. They're doing it in Canada, right? Like the big guys are involved in Canada, and we are now going to be collaborating with them. And then I think ultimately it will be the government, right? They're always going to be the slowest movers, as you know, Stephen. So, but again, the opportunity is going to be patients first, and they will pay. Like they will pay if it's helping them, and if the price is affordable and the quality of the products are good, and if they're being educated properly and they're getting the right, information to them as well.
Yeah. Look, we could and hopefully we will in 2 weeks' time when you're in London talk for hours on this. Super excited to have Avicanna back at Cannabis Europa, 2nd to 3rd of May in London. Super excited to see the progress of Avicanna. It is without doubt one of the most exciting companies in the sector, and certainly a flag bearer for how businesses can be done right. And Aris, as always, an absolute pleasure to have you on Business of Cannabis.
Thank you, Stephen. No, I appreciate the kind words, appreciate the ongoing support. Looking forward to meeting in person and connecting back with Europe as a whole.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, have a great day.